Hi, I'm Misty Velasky, and you're watching Ojai Valley News In Depth. Joining us today is a very special guy I'm sure you've seen around town, Mel Bloom. Mel, thank you for joining us, taking some time out from your writing of columns and literary classes around town. Glad to have you here in the studio. So tell us, you've been around for a while in town. How long have you been in Ojai?
27 years.
And what brought you here?
It's an interesting story. My wife used to have a shop in Los Angeles, and it was very successful in terms of the clientele and so forth. And after the Christmas rush, where everybody who worked at the shop was exhausted, some of the ladies at the shop put together a present for my wife, Andrea, and it was a week at the Sheila Clef's place. I forgot the name.
Oh, the Oaks.
At the Oaks. And she calls me up after being here for several days, and she says, when you pick me up on Sunday, I want you to see something because there's a store in the lobby that's going out of business and we could buy it. And that's what started the whole thing.
And of course, that shop became Tottenham Court.
Yes, yeah. That was the fourth Tottenham Court in the chain.
Very cool. So, you have, 27 years in Ojai, but you have a long history in Los Angeles as a literary agent. So how'd you get into that whole crazy mess?
That too was an interesting story. I came here on a summer vacation from Chicago. I used to work in Chicago after I graduated school. And I had, the second child had already arrived, and the Chicago weather is different. It's very, very cold in the winter, and the time you dressed up the first child in leggings and helmet and earmuffs and everything else, and you started on the second child, the first child melted already, and I says, I want to go back to Los Angeles where my grandparents lived, and my father had passed away, so my mother had joined my aunt, who was her sister, and her parents there, and so I was left alone in Chicago with the beginnings of a family, and I decided during a summer vacation to take an opportunity to look for a job out here. I was doing public relations work in Chicago, and nobody would hire me with two children. They said, if you come out, we'll talk to you, but we can't hire you now. Nobody wanted to pay for moving me, and I was an unknown commodity. I had an uncle who was a film producer, and he was a client to the William Morris office. So I really got that job through nepotism.
So you worked with lots of big names in the industry, of course. But what was really your passion? What kept you going at this? And were you any good?
Well, I think that would be for other people to judge. I really like the entertainment business. I wasn't representing writers at that time. I was representing actors, and at that particular time, the William Morris Agency had represented a great number of the prominent actors. I wasn't handling the prominent actors. I was handling actors of lesser stature. And it was nice, and it was fun, and I liked the business. But I really didn't like working under those circumstances, as I used to say. I didn't go through the mailroom. But of the 54 agents or 55 agents, I was number 56 in significance. and I just didn't like the corporate style. It made me uncomfortable, and I knew they weren't going to adjust to me, and I couldn't adjust to them. So I decided to look for another job. And consequently, while I was at the Morris, a lot of people had befriended me, and there was a new organization, very well established in New York, that opened up out here. And it was a big agency in New York, and they wanted to start a writers department.
Great.
And because of the friends that I had made, a lot of significant people in the industry went to bat for me, and they said to one of the owners of the agency, if you hire this guy, meaning me, you will find he may not be ready yet, but in 5 months he'll be better than anybody you could find. So that's a
and
nice
were you?
thing. Well, apparently I was, because I worked there, and I loved it, and I was very, very happy there. The agency was called Ashley Steiner, and it was a very big agency, and it later became it absorbed several other agencies in the process, and became a one of the biggest agencies in the business.
And so I'm sure that helped you in writing columns for us for the Ojai Valley News, of course, and in your teaching methods for your writing classes around town.
Well, once I became a literary agent and became very comfortable with it, I used to go out and, well, when I stayed at the Ashley Steiner Agency for 7 years, and then I opened up my own office. And then I used to go out to UCLA, the writing classes, and speak there because I had a lot of the clients who were teachers there. And they'd ask me to come out there and speak. And that's how I'd find some of the best writers we ever represented. There is a notion that people wonder, how do you get into this business? And I was always asked that by the students at UCLA. And I said, well, the best way is nepotism, but most of us don't have that going for us. So I think the people who have the best chance are the writers. Actors who are trying to get in have to wait for calls from directors or casting directors. Writers can write their way in. And I believe that at that particular time, and it's probably the same way, most of the agencies weren't interested in new young writers coming out of a university. They wanted writers with credits. Well, I felt differently about that. I felt there's a great pool of talent at the universities, and we got some of our best writers. We had to start them. They didn't have any credits. We got them started, and it was a lot of fun. I used to say, if you couldn't be a pediatrician, which I really would have liked to have been, but I knew I couldn't get into med school, and I knew I couldn't stay in med school because those technical classes are beyond me. And I said, if you couldn't be a pediatrician, the next best thing is to be a literary agent.
Wow, that's a big statement.
Well, I love the work. I did.
So, as we were talking about, you write columns for us at the Ojai Valley News every single Friday, which I know is a pretty popular feature of ours, and you teach writing classes. I've heard that you have a really strong love of British literature. I
do. I was raised on that stuff. From the time I was 5, my mother would read to me a lot of the classics and so forth. And in fact, next week's column is going to be about a Russian novel, Anna Karenina, that my grandmother asked me to read gave me the book and asked me to read when I was 15. So I came from a family that really did appreciate literature and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, loving British literature, I know you've been to London a few times and been to Britain quite a few times. So tell me about this bench club that you have.
Oh, the Berkeley Square Bench Club. You're too young, Misty, to remember a song or to know of a song called The Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square. It was written during wartime, and it's a very romantic song. And I just loved the song, and so did my wife. And we'd always manage to sit on a bench in Berkeley Square. And I'd often say, I wonder what you can do to get a bench here, because all the benches had plaques on them donated by so-and-so. And on one trip, my wife gets back to the hotel and says, I'm going to get you this bench. So she makes some calls and finds out what we have to do. And at the end, she says, okay, this is what we do. You write this person in Westminster where all the offices are for running the government, which is a section of London, and you send them $800. I says, $800? We can do a lot with $800. And she says, it'll be the best investment we'll ever make. And it turned out to be. So we got the bench there, and it became a very famous bench. And when we ordered it in June, it was put down in November. So I went back in November to see the installation of the bench. And I met the people in the bureau who's responsible for that. And he said, when we saw the inscription that you wanted on the bench, we knew that we had to put that right in the center of Berkeley Square, because most of the other benches make the place funereal. They were all they all say things like, in memory of so-and-so. And my bench says, presented by American Mel Bloom, who hopes everybody who sits in this little enclave of heaven will hear the song of the nightingale. And it's still there. And it has been written up in a number of publications.
LA Times, I saw.
Yes, in the LA Times and in some British magazines. And and you get a pin. I wished I'd have worn the pin. I always wore it on one of my coats. And you get a pin if you sat on that bench and send me a picture. So,
And you have a lot of people that have done that, right?
oh yeah, over almost 1,100 people. And I only know about 1,000 of them. And they come from all over. Some of them from England, some of them from Canada, all over the United States.
And most of them you probably don't know, right? Just friends of friends who've heard about this little club that you have?
Yes, that's it. Well, at one
Great.
time, for the first 2 years, my wife and I used to have little parties for the members who we knew, who all came from Southern California. And then the second year, the party was for 100 people. And we had it at the Art Center here. It was a big dinner and a big luncheon and everything. And I says, this will be the last one. We can't afford to feed the whole world all the time every year. So we've had a lot of fun with it. And I still from time to time get pictures, but and letters from people who've been there who send me the pictures. And I send out the button, the pin. And one of my biggest thrills is to see people wearing this pin who I don't know here around in Southern California.
Oh, yeah. Just walking by somebody and you're, hey, I know that.
Yes, yeah.
Mel, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I've learned so much about you. We've worked together for 10 years now. I had no idea that you had so much history.
Well, when you get to be 85 years old, you accumulate a lot of history.
Thanks again, Mel. I'm Misty Velasky. This is the illustrious Mel Bloom. This has been Ojai Valley News In Depth.